Hello everyone, welcome back to our Python lab or Python class, my dear students, programmers or future programmers. Today we're covering looping in Python. It's quite obvious, very often you have to repeat many times the same or pretty much the same task. In software applications, we process people, accounts, books, cars, very big amounts of stuff. And obviously we need to program such routine, repetitive tasks, and that's why we have special statements in Python. There are two. One is for, second is while, and they allow us to program such repetitive tasks, something you have to do over and over again. Let's start with the for loop. Before we start, let's explain. For loop mostly is needed when you have to repeat certain task a certain number of times, in advance. And for loop depends on a special library function, very popular library function in Python. It's called range. By the way, next lesson we are going to discuss functions in details, but now to make a long story short, range is just a sequence of integer numbers, or a continuous set of integer numbers. You can use range in 3 different formats. As you see in my book, you can use range with this one parameter stop, with 2 parameters start and stop, and finally with 3 parameters start, stop, and step. So if you're using range with a stop, the range includes all the numbers from 0 to stop minus 1. If you use range in this format, then the range includes all the numbers from start to stop minus 1. And finally, the most advanced range format, when you start from certain number, you stop at stop minus 1, but you don't go one by one. You go forward or backwards by step. So step could be both a positive number or negative number. So you can go up in this range or you can go down. Now, remember, stop number is never included in the range. That's very important to remember. And yes, it's possible the range could be empty sometimes. For example, this range doesn't contain any numbers because you're supposed to start from 0 and you're supposed to stop at 0 minus 1. It doesn't make sense, so sometimes a range may be empty. And finally, you can see the format for the for loop. So you have to declare an integer variable in your program. Sometimes we call it loop counter. Special variable, it's going to control your for loop. Then you provide in keyword and the range. The range basically defines your looping scope. Again, don't forget semicolon, column, and don't forget indent. It's very important for Python syntax. Let's practice now. I'm going to show you a few different situations with the range function, and I'm trying range with one number, with two numbers, with three numbers, with a negative step, and finally I'm trying to show you an empty range in lines 19 and 20. So let's save it, let's run it, and what you see is quite expected. You see range from 0 to 4, so last number not included. You see the range now from 1. Now I start from 1 to 4. If I go step 2, then I got range 1, 3, but not 5. Again, 5 is not part of the range. If I go backwards, if I start from 5, and if I go -1, then I finish at 1, because again, last number 0 not included into the range. And finally, if I'm trying to print in range 0, nothing happens, nothing is printed, because this range is just empty. It has no integer numbers at all. Wonderful. Next, maybe more universal type of loop. It's called while. So it's pretty simple format. You have Boolean expression. Boolean expression, very open comparison. Whenever you compare variables or literals, obviously the result of the comparison is true, false Boolean values. And you have block of indented statements. So how it's working? This block is being executed for as long as this expression is true. As soon as this expression becomes false, the loop is finished, and you go to the next statement after while loop. By the way, if this is false just at the beginning, that means the whole construct is empty. So sometimes while loop doesn't do anything because expression is already false. Very common mistake or pitfall beginners may get into is so-called endless loop. So what may happen, you may not, or you may forget during your block to change this expression. And if you don't change this expression, let's say if it's always true, then computer going to repeat those statements forever. And how do you feel it? You feel your program is kind of frozen. So computer just doesn't respond to your actions because it's too busy. And endless loops are completely your fault. It's not computer's fault, it's human's fault, because in while loop, you have to make sure this expression is changing, and eventually, somehow, it's going to become false, which means the termination of the while loop. And again, a demo, very simple demo. I initialize my variable, my integer variable by 1, and for as long as it's less than 10, I'm printing numbers, and very important, I increment them. So if, let's say, I forget to increment, then I'm gonna print number 1 forever. I'm going to have endless loop. So let's see how it's working. Let's run it. And yes, that's exactly what I wanted. Probably I could also create the same loop using for loop. So maybe it's gonna be a little bit shorter. My range would be from 1 to 11. So let's try like an alternative for what you have done in lines 3 to 5. I'm gonna do it now in just 2 lines, 8 and 9. Let's try. Let's see if this output and this output are the same. Yes, you see there is no difference between the first output and the next output. So sometimes, maybe, I agree, for loop could be easy, more natural, but at the same time, while loop is more universal. Anything you can do in for loop can be done in while loop. But the other way around, it's not true. Some tasks could not be done just through the range. Sometimes you don't have any ranges, you just have to repeat certain task until certain condition is met. So sometimes you must use while loop, but for loop also quite useful, quite powerful, and may cover a lot of different scenarios. Next lesson we are going to continue analyzing loops, and we are going to cover 2 very interesting techniques, because sometimes you understand in the middle of the loop there is no point to continue it. Something happened. You gotta stop it. So we are going to contemplate a little bit on how to finish our loops ahead of time. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget about your likes, your comments, support the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.